Well, you're watching the midterm scorecard edition of Beyond the Headlines. Let's bring in Special Advisor to President Tinubu on Media and Public Communication, Sunday Diary, for an exclusive conversation on the midterm review of President Tinubu's Renewed Hope agenda. Thank you for joining us on the program, Mr. Diary.
Nifemi, thank you so much for having me this evening.
President Tinubu just got back from Rome for the installation of Pope Leo XIV. Beyond the ceremony, I remember a few weeks ago you spoke about Nigeria re-engaging globally. Are we looking at new partnerships, maybe in peace building or humanitarian work with this visit?
I think so. I think the gains of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's visit to the Vatican is just beyond, like you say, beyond the headlines. It's a great diplomatic effort when you look at it from either the religious angle, also from the angle of networking. And I think most important statement made by that trip is to show the president as a president that is not biased against anybody when it comes to religion. Like he loves to say, the words of our national anthem, though tongue, tribe, and religion may differ, in brotherhood and united we stand as a country. The president's presence there simply gave action to those lofty words of our anthem. And if you look at the profile of the new Pope, you look at the work he has done in the past, in different parts of the world, humanitarian efforts that he has made, making friends across the aisle, you know, is someone that will be really critical going forward and will also play a role in religious harmony in Nigeria.
And there's that meeting he had with the Society of Bishops where they told him to also attend their meetings here in Nigeria. Interesting collaboration along religious lines. I'm wondering how you react to that.
Well, I think the first, for me, the first masterstroke was the fact that the president, unprecedented, traveled to the Vatican. A Muslim president traveled to the Vatican with 4 or 5 bishops. That, for me, was just a masterstroke. No better statement to show that this country is united when it comes to development and even our politics, and that religion will not be a divider. The president has exemplified that by taking them along. But beyond that, that meeting, you know, and very interesting meeting, a very comfortable conversation. You could see the president in his elements in listening to them. And this is a president that is, like I said, unbiased against any religion. He's a statesman. He knows that when it comes to nation building, what matters are the talents, the resources, and the goals of development you have set for yourself. Religion, ethnicity, and the rest become secondary. And we've seen it. In countries where religion is put apart, where ethnicity is put aside, where the focus is on development, you see accelerated development. And I think that's what this president represents. And that trip, the several takeaways from the trip to the Vatican, is that this is a tolerant president. This is a president that is a statesman. This is a president that can sit with anyone, irrespective, so long as you are a Nigerian, to discuss the way to move this country forward.
Another interesting picture that trended from that trip was that of him and Peter Obi, as well as the former Ekiti State Governor. The conversation, as we understand it, did not center around politics. Politics took, you know, a backseat in that conversation. Walk us through how much collaboration this president has enjoyed in the past 2 years from the opposition when it comes to nation building.
Well, I think let me start from the present. Some people might want to argue this, but let me put it out there. The mere fact that you have a president who is in power for just 2 years and with 2 clear years to another election, you have parties imploding, you have governors and top senators from other parties joining the train of Mr. President, says a lot. And what is the reason? They want to be part of the progress and development, the Renewed Hope agenda. They've seen deliverables, they've seen outcomes that speak to development that will benefit their own people. Let's take the state governors, for instance. What were they earning before the president came in? And then our revenue went up. The FAC allocation went up by 60%. States that were in serious debt, they were running to the banks for debts and taking loans, now have more than enough to develop their states. Every single state is benefiting, irrespective of party affiliations. And several other strong indicators about this economy. When we started out a year ago, 2 years ago, the first year, nobody really gave this president a chance. It was very tough decisions. But he promised that it was going to stay the course. The removal of oil subsidy, the removal of subsidy on forex, the tariff on energy, and a couple of other reforms that he instituted. But he stayed the course. And we are now seeing strong economic indicators from our microeconomic of this country. And I think, for me, that's the attraction of people coming in. And when you come in to partner, and you cue into that renewed hope agenda that has 8 presidential priority areas.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. But the other way to look at it would be that they just want to be with the party that is in power. And the baggage that APC now has to carry, bringing in the same people you've criticized for holding back Nigeria for 16 months into your fold. You know what your critics say? They say APC is headed the same way PDP did, having lost election in 2023.
I strongly disagree, because you can compare the scorecards. We've had presidents in the past. We can always judge every president by the actions they have taken and the actions they have not taken. We have data out there. But when you look at, pay very close attention, this president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, did not inherit a perfect economy nor a perfect country. We were at a point in which revenue was dwindling, at a point in which it was extremely difficult to provide for our people. The cost of living was high. Subsidy, most importantly, was taking away our resources, $7.6 billion every year. And then you have a president who came into power, decided to press the button that previous presidents did not press for obvious reasons, but went further, took the bull by the horns, and took those tough decisions. And it's not enough to just say it, because it will have just, for the sake of political expediency, just refused to take those decisions because he wants to be popular and get a second term and get a free ride. But he took those decisions and stood by them. And he kept working at it, pulling the necessary triggers, ensuring reforms in over 10 or 11 sectors of the economy. So people can, there's evidence that this president has a clear vision and is decisive. You've seen an aggressive approach to diversification of the country's revenue base from oil. Non-oil revenue alone climbing 1.6 billion last year alone. And we can go. So there's clear evidence that this is a performing president. And who does not want to join the train of a performer and progress? And that's it. So other explanations will be out there. It's politics.
Yes.
Yes, please.
We are going to talk about, all of these economic indices and details shortly. But let's stay with the politics of things that you brought up. And on one hand is the need to have a vibrant opposition to keep the incumbent on its toes. On the other hand is the concern of multiplicity of interests, like we've seen in Delta State, which some say might be a clog in the wheel of progress for the ruling party, because now they have to fight for the ticket. There are people who have been in APC before the governor moved. It will change the dynamics of who runs and who doesn't run. You don't see that as a challenge, perhaps in the future, in the nearest future for the APC?
Well, I don't see that as a challenge. Let's stay with the present. There are rules to this game. There are rules to the democratic games when it comes to elections. There are clear rules. And those rules will not change whether you've been in the APC before or you just decamped. Whether you're in PDP, these rules also are present there. So let's stay with the present. And the present is that people, when you also look at it, the bulk of those in APC now were in PDP before, or ANPP. So we've had this movement, is a current, is a political current you get in every political climb. And as to the fear of a one-party state, I think we have other parties. The last time I checked, we have more than about 16 registered political parties by INEC. So, of course, you can say the opposition is weak at this time. And that's what happens. When you have a strong ruling party, you have a ruling party that is performing, a ruling party that has a clear agenda and is following through, where the indicators are positive, you get this kind of development. So let's stay with the present. As talking about the future, let's see how this works out. But I'm saying there are rules to this game, and those rules will not be changed.
I'll take your advice. I'll stick with the present. I could probe further to talk about party ideology and what that means for the ruling party. But we'll keep that conversation for the future.
There is an ideology. There is an ideology.
Well, that is arguable at this point. But you've said that Nigeria is going through bold changes, like removing the full subsidy and floating the naira. But for many Nigerians, Mr. Dare, life feels harder, not better. What real day-to-day benefits have these reforms brought so far?
Well, let me say, Nifemi, life is harder, that's subjective. But you cannot really argue with the facts that are out there. Where did we start from? Where are we now? Like I say, when you institute reforms, and every political system or economic system you have reforms coming on. Reforms is not from 0 to 100%. Reforms is progressive. And then from that progressive nature, you can now track the impact. Of course, things won't change overnight. Like the president said, he clearly understands that sacrifices are being made. He understands that Nigerians are persevering. He understands that the support of Nigerians critical to these reforms. And I think right from the onset, it was very clear that we cannot continue the way we've been going on that path, that we needed to chart a critical path for development. And part of that critical path is first to stop this country from bleeding. When you look at $7.3 or $7.4 billion every year for oil subsidy, that bleeding was stopped. When you look at the forex subsidy, then you have arbitrage, and a few individuals were making billions out of the arbitrage. He also plucked that. The president had a choice not to do anything about it. Now, we're seeing those monies that have been saved being plugged not only into the budget, but also swelling up the FAC and the allocation that goes to the subnationals that are also critical in the development we're talking about. Nifemi, I can roll out quite a number of things. You see our foreign reserves, because this really matters when you get into economic diplomacy, when you get to negotiations with other countries. You look at our foreign reserves at 41 billion. You look at our non-oil exports going up 1.7 billion. You look at the trade balance surplus that we have. You also look at the fact that this country, under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is also paying up its debts to the IMF and the World Bank. And then you see the projections coming forward. One of such reports that we had recently is that in the last 10 years, we have had the kind of growth never witnessed before in the last 2 years.
Certainly.
You look at the third quarter of last year, you look at the fourth quarter of last year, you look at the first quarter of this year, you see improvements. And I think, the data is right, and these changes will trickle down eventually to our people.
I hear you clearly, Mr. Dare, and I'm a little bit familiar with the data because of the nature of my job. For instance, inflation slightly dropped to 23.71% in April, down from 24.23% in March. But most people still feel like prices, especially food prices, are out of control. I mean, it boils down to the quality, the direct impact it's having on the quality of life, the purchasing power of the people, and how they can get by on a daily basis. Why is there such a big gap between the stats, what the stats are saying, and what the people are feeling?
Well, I don't think there's a big gap. Let's stay with the food prices. If you back up January, February, March, and I can tell you several national newspapers, after it was reported that food prices were coming down by 40%, 30% across the country, several leading newspapers who were, critics of this government decided to go into town themselves. They went to the markets with their reporters. And I can tell you, about 7 of them had headlines, bold headlines saying, yes, food prices were coming down, the range of 30 to 40%. So that is based on evidence. And I think that has not changed so far. Yes, the cost of living will not crash down at once, just the way we're seeing inflation come down. There's a connection between cost of living and inflation. What was inflation when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu took over? What is the inflation rate right now? It's dropping. And as the inflation rate drops, the cost of living will also drop. The recalibration of the Nigerian economy will take a bit of a toll for a while, will take a bit of a sacrifice for a while. But then, clearly, the economy will eventually turn the corner. And I think that right now, midpoint of this administration, there are strong indicators that things will improve.
Well, I bet that Nigerians are really counting on that. But let's talk about the performance of the president's cabinet for a bit, because his second anniversary is nearly here. The Central Results Delivery and Coordination Unit, we hear, is about to present a fresh scorecard on ministers' performance for the first quarter of 2025. Just how important is this kind of quarterly ministerial assessment for governance in Nigeria?
I think it's extremely important. Just beyond Nigeria alone, I think every government tracks the performance of its cabinet ministers, so it's not really new. And of course, that performance tracking is not really an attempt to indict the ministers. It's an attempt to track the efforts they have made, where they've been able to perform, where they have challenges, and what can be provided to support their work. And I think that for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to set up this presidential review team is one of the most significant decisions he took, because then you can look at the set goals for each sector and for each minister, determine what's the milestones, determine how they've been able to meet those milestones, but most importantly, locate where the challenges are and what can be done quickly to make sure that those challenges are overcome and the expected outcomes based on the KPI set are met.
How do you react to critics who say sometimes political considerations influence these scorecards? How independent and apolitical is this assessment?
Well, I know 2 weeks ago, Aja Adiza sent the presidential communication team a snapshot of the effort they have made. And what I saw is quite detailed, down to earth. And I know what I'm talking about. You look at what they have turned in, working very closely with the ministries, tracking them. This is independent, it's down to earth, and there's no influence there because, again, it has to be based on evidence. You cannot give what you don't have. You cannot claim to have done X, Y, Z when you have not done it. So I think that is a very transparent process. It's also a very tasking process, and I think it's beneficial for our democracy.
I'll tell you what the leader of the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center recently said. He did say that some ministers are focused on their government responsibilities. Many others seem distracted by preparations for the 2027 elections. And some are even described as largely invisible in their roles. Quickly, react to concerns about possible early political distractions and whether or not we're going to see another cabinet shuffle after May 29.
Well, for me, I think that I've seen all the ministers really work hard at the assignments given by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And that's because on a constant basis, there's that radar on the activities. The leader of the civil society group, well, did he provide evidence of ministers who were more focused on political activities of 2027? I think the ministers know very clearly that there's going to be a report card, and they have just focused on that. That's what's happening, and that's what the president expects of them. The president does not cut corners, does not mince words when it comes to their performance. They know that. And I think the politics will always be in the air, but these people are appointed to play a particular role, and they're focused on that. And I tell you that we have worked very closely with them. From what I've seen across board, the ministers have really been at work. Right. And like I said, we turned the corner, and the impact of what they have done will be felt on an incremental basis.
We have just about 2 minutes to go. Let's touch on insecurity quickly. Things are not getting better. For instance, in Borno, I think it was last week where the military base was sacked by terrorists. There are huge concerns in that regard. And I'm wondering what this administration is doing differently to salvage the situation in Borno, in a couple of states in North Central, so that these regions can finally grow.
Well, I think just last Friday, the president had in audience the intelligence chiefs and also the other chiefs. And the briefing that he took, it was very clear about the need to make sure that the cooperation with other security agencies from other countries across the border was improved. But I think the most important is that the Chief of Defense Staff did say that what we're seeing is the spillover of the Sahelian security problem. And that's true, So what we're seeing now cannot be isolated at all. Now, our forces now have extra air power and cover. We have a president who has placed a premium on security of life and property. And we have the National Security Advisor who has been to these parts and working in concert with all the security forces, the sub-national government, to make sure that this is dealt with. Don't forget that even recent reports, as at February, March, showed that terrorism had dropped remarkably, and then this sudden upsurge. And I think the government is up to the task to make sure that this sudden upsurge is also abated.
Well, you have the Borno State governor directly attacking politicians, being at the center of some of the challenges. How's the presidency reacting to this?
Well, that was about 2 days ago. And I think it's important. It's not just enough to make this allegation. Right. He has access to Mr. President. He can come forward with the names of these politicians that he knows clearly are involved, and the president will do the needful. So he needs to come forward with evidence, and he has access. He can have audience with the president at any time. And I think that's the way. It has to be a collaborative effort, information, intelligence, all of that important to making sure that we fight insecurity anywhere in this country.
Good place to leave it. It's about 6 days to midterm. I'm hoping that, that the presidency has its own report card that will be ready in a few days. Nigerians also have their own report card. I'm hoping that both tally, when they are both out. But we have to leave it here. Mr. Sunny Diary, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you. Nifemi, thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. Well, that's our show today, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow with the Minister